Well, hey. You all got so quiet. I guess that's my cue. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here today to share in this event with me. I've explained this whole thing to some of you directly in social media posts and so on about the event, but I'll take a minute to explain it again. When you're a pianist, the bulk of what you do is to accompany other people. The bulk of what you do is not as a solo pianist. So most of what I do is accompanying other people. I'm no exception to that rule. I've accompanied numerous players on solo or student recitals. I've played keyboard in the pit for various shows. And I've accompanied choirs, both in church and school and community settings, and including here at St. Gabriel's. That's all perfectly fine. This is not me complaining. But once in a while, you want to do something just to advance your skills as a soloist, so that is the aim of this. I was inspired about a year ago by my friend, the incomparable Julia Rillo, back there, who did a solo voice recital, much for some of the same reasons. And then all of that just conspired in a solo recital here today, for the first time in very nearly 10 years, since I did one as part of my undergraduate requirements. So if it goes well, I'll do one every 10 years, and I'll see you in 2034 when I'm 40. I know that this sounds a lot like a vanity project, and that's because that's exactly what it is. But I just appreciate you being here to sharing it with me, and I think I can be allotted one vanity project every 10 years, don't you? All right. So in any case, when I started planning this, I tried to kind of think about the type of music that people don't usually hear me play. Obviously, I play a lot of musical theater stuff, sacred music here in church, and then as part of church services, I do kind of like the easy listening repertoire that works during an offertory or a communion on a service. What I don't get to play is classical music that it might be a little more of an upbeat quality, or really anything from the 20th century when composers were starting to experiment a little bit with some musical norms. So that's the direction I leaned for this. Those of you that attend church here, what you're going to hear is a far cry from what you usually hear, but I think in a good way. I hope you'll find the selections engaging and interesting, even if they don't necessarily fall under that category of easy listening when they're collecting the offertory and you're sitting there meditating or whatever. Those of you that are theater acquaintances of mine, what you will hear is, again, a far cry from musical theater. This will not be the score to The Prom or Into the Woods. But again, I think given your very artistic personalities, you'll find the selections intriguing. Those of you who maybe I've accompanied before, this time you can sit back and relax. It's my turn. So I'm going to start with Gershwin's 3 piano preludes. Most know George Gershwin is responsible for some larger works, such as Rhapsody in Blue, Porgy and Bess, and Strike Up the Band, but he also excelled with smaller works, many of them for solo piano. That's what these are. The common thread through much of what he's done is that he sort of bridged the gap between jazz and classical styles. So you'll hear plenty of jazz influence with these 3 preludes, and that was definitely a step out of my comfort zone as a mostly classically trained pianist. One kind of enjoyable thing about playing these pieces is that they are somewhat improvisational, which just means you don't have to stick 100% to what's on the page. You can take some liberties with style, dynamics, tempo, various expressive elements, and if the spirit moves you, even notes and rhythms. So what you're going to hear right now is about 90% Gershwin and then 10% Leonowitz, and my hope is that's exactly what he would have wanted. Thank you. Thanks. One acknowledgement to a person who is not present that I have to give with those three pieces would be my college piano professor, Mr. David Allen Ware. He was, so I studied with him during my undergrad from 2012 to 16. And then his instruction obviously really stuck with me. He was kind of one of those that, first of all, he had a heart of gold. He was very positive about everything, and he made you want to be better. Being in his studio, you wanted to play better and make progress. You wanted to be there. So when I decided to do this, I reached out to him and said, just a long shot, but if I drove out to Pittsburgh, would you give me a lesson on this repertoire? And he said, absolutely. So I went out to Pittsburgh at the end of June, and we did that lesson together, and it was wonderful. I ran into, not only did I see him, I saw a few other people from my undergrad. One professor in particular was on campus that day, and he didn't recognize me immediately. He just said, give me your first initial. I said, J, and he said, Jacob. I said, yeah, you got it. And then he said, well, your hair is, and I thought, oh God. Oh God, what's this gonna be? And he said, it's longer. Wow. That's usually not what people say about the direction in which my hair has gone. And it's true, I let it grow out a little bit now. Perhaps it's an exercise in futility, but anyway. So it was very refreshing to have somebody say that to me. And then to see Mr. Ware. Mr. Ware had a way of extracting as much information as possible from the music, from the score. So a couple times in the space of this lesson, he said to me, well, Jake, what does it say there? Are you really doing that? I would say, well, no, I guess not. I could improve on that. So I guess it goes to show that even when you've been teaching for 8 years, as much as you harp on your kids to follow directions, sometimes you don't even do it. So it's a very humbling experience to go and have that lesson with him. But in any case, next we have a set of pieces called the Visions Fugitives from Sergei Prokofiev. This is a set of 20 miniatures for piano. Don't be alarmed, I'm only doing 8, not all 20. Prokofiev was a 20th century Russian composer, and his works, like most 20th century composers, tended to discard some elements of musical tradition, but where he was unique was that he also retained some more traditional elements. So in a sense, he challenged progress, but he also challenged tradition. I guess he was just fickle that way. And with these pieces, he combines the influence of some other contemporaries. So in particular, another Russian composer, Alexander Scriabin, was known for some of his piano sonatas that really pushed the boundaries of tonality, like so. So that's just a little Scriabin excerpt for you. Prokofiev was also inspired by Arnold Schoenberg. Arnold Schoenberg composed with a methodology known as serialism, or you could also refer to it as the 12-tone method. So to explain serialism in a nutshell, because I am an educator, so I have to do this. There's 12 different pitch classes that a composer can utilize in Western music. So we have C, C sharp or D flat, D, D sharp or E flat, E, F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp or A flat, A sharp or B flat, and B. And then we're back to C, just an octave above the first C. So that's 12 different pitches, essentially, that you can make use of, that a composer could make use of. And what he would do was compose melodies that used each one once and one time only. So here's an example. They were often called 12-tone rows. So here's an example of what that might sound like. That was a 12-tone row. And then he would like start over. He would just start over. He would just do another one. Or he would play the one that he just did backwards or flip it on its side or, whatever. Another example of one right here. That was another 12-tone roll. So the idea with a 12-tone row is that there's no sense of tonally where home is. There's no tonal hierarchy, so to speak. Usually we have a tonal hierarchy. For example, so I had to have a little fun with that. So there's a feeling with that melody, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or the ABCs, whatever you want to call it, of home is here, with that note right there, in this case, C. If you're working with a 12-tone row, where no one note occurs more often than the others, you don't have that sense of home. So essentially, Schoenberg takes this whole idea of a tonal hierarchy or there being a sense of a tonal home or center, and he says, I'm not doing that. My music is just going to reject that rule, and it's going to wander, and it's going to do its thing, and it'll be fine. That's what Schoenberg did. So that is one influence, another influence for Prokofiev on these pieces you're going to hear. Prokofiev's third influencer was Claude Debussy. Claude Debussy was a French composer whose music is largely considered impressionist. Impressionism was first a visual art movement in which a sense of haziness and non-specific like bursts of color kind of predominate. Monet's Water Lilies is a prime example. Okay, that's the one people usually know or have seen. And that haziness or lack of a sharp focus will predominate music from that art movement as well, like so. So what Prokofiev does with these pieces, the Visions Fugitives, is he essentially takes a combination, he takes all those various influences, puts them in a pot, and he just mixes them up. And he does what he pleases with each of them. The pieces reportedly got their name from, he first performed them for somebody else at the home of a friend of his who was a poet named Constantine Belmont. Belmont was so moved and inspired by this set of pieces that he actually wrote a poem on the spot. And there's a line in the poem, to make sure I get it right. In every fleeting vision I see worlds filled with the fickle play of rainbows. And hence comes the title of this sense of miniatures, because Visions Fugitives is fleeting visions. Enjoy. Thanks so much. Which brings us to Shostakovich. So Shostakovich was another Russian composer, came a little bit after Prokofiev, and his creative life was sort of marred by Stalin's rule. Much of what he wrote was inspired by really a pretty left-leaning for that time and Play's sense of social justice. For example, he had 15 symphonies. Of those 15, numbers 2, 5, 7, 8, 11, and 12 were also statements of some kind on war and politics, usually anti-war. 9 and 10, symphonies 9 and 10 were a consecutive thumbing of his nose directly at Stalin. So right before Symphony Number 9, World War II had just ended. And I think Shostakovich was a known composer at that time. So I think that Stalin's expectation was that now Shostakovich could write this really grand work in his honor and so on and so forth. And that is so totally not what the ninth is. It's like funny and playful, and it's a thumbing of the nose. And then Stalin died, and then Shostakovich wrote 10, and that was a celebration. Okay? So basically a posthumous middle finger to Joseph Stalin. And then number 13, very late in Shostakovich's life, was partially a kind of a glorification of the role of women in Soviet Russia, which at that time was a kind of a very lofty statement for him to be making. But anyway, we're dealing with very heavy and emotionally entrenched material when you look at his canon of works. The second piano concerto that we're going to do today is actually sort of a departure from that. It is uncharacteristically cheerful for Dmitri Shostakovich. It has its more emotionally torrid and frantic moments, but it's one of his more jovial works. That can likely be owed to the fact that he actually wrote it for his son to help his son advance his piano skills. So I guess he wasn't just going to be like, yeah, here's a piano concerto all about the oppression of living in Soviet Russia. Go practice, have fun, love you. I mean, I don't have children, but I would think that wouldn't be the move. That's not what you would do. So it's just, I don't know, it's more just one of his more jovial works, I think mostly for that reason. You're in for, therefore, not what you typically hear from Shostakovich, but still just a really neat and interesting piece that I've kind of always wanted to have a go at. When I first started conceptualizing that I would do this recital, I thought of this piece. It felt like a long shot because a concerto, you need piano and orchestra. But with many concertos, there's what's called a piano reduction of the orchestra part. So I reached out to my dear friend, Julie Urillo. She wishes me not to describe her this way, but the incomparable Julie Urillo. And said, would you be interested? And she said, yes, absolutely. And we did it. So that shows that nothing is a long shot if you have a friend to support you. Just the first movement. Give me some time, and when I do another one of these in 10 years, I might be able to do the whole thing. So, Julie, you have a decade to learn symphony movements 2 and 3. And yeah, here we go. Enjoy. I'll talk to you a little more after. Okay. Thanks so much for being here today. Once again, to share in this project of mine. Appreciate it. If the spirit moves you, you can join us back in the choir room, just through those doors and back the hall a little bit for drinks and cookies. Thank you.
I